Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of Grassroots Motorsports Live. I'm JG Pastor Jack. You are here on a fantastic night. Our friend Vivek Goel is going to be with us in just a few minutes. In the meantime, before we get to all that exciting stuff, go down, whatever platform you're watching us on, do the social media stuff that means so much to us. Throw us a like, throw us a share. If you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to our feed. It means a lot to us. It helps out the folks that make this show possible, like CRC Industries right over here, like Autobooks, Aerobooks in Burbank, who, I have it on good authority, they are actually in the chat on Facebook right now, Jerry from Autobooks, and he just let me know that if you want to get something before Christmas, you order in the next like 24 hours or so, they're probably going to be able to get it to you before Christmas. They're from Burbank, so that's pretty cool and great place to get your holiday gifts. If I sound particularly awful, it's because I feel particularly awful. I had another one of these like 24-hour cold things again, and so I am just full. Like, I just emptied out the medicine cabinet into my face before the show. So whatever happens in the next 60 minutes or so, bear with me. And I appreciate, like, my wife tries to give me like these herbal medicines and holistic stuff, and like, oh, my grandfather invented this cold cure, and it's he used the willow bark and the meat of a snail, and it's applied in a poultice to your foot. No, I want the stuff that the local goth kids are taking down to the cemetery and drinking to get loaded while they listen to some, Switchblade Symphony or something. So, yeah, gonna be some rough sledding here for the next hour, but I'm gonna get through it. Okay. We got a good crowd. Yeah, Andy Hollis says I look awful. That's a special effect. But yeah, hey, we're gonna do it. Okay, let's introduce our guest this evening. Let me get my fancy cans on here. Let's get things looking the way they're supposed to, and we will talk to our friend Vivek. How are you, my friend? How you doing?
I'm doing great, JG. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So, look, we've chatted in the past a little bit. I have been a huge fan of every Nationals autocross course that I've ever driven of yours. You're a pro solo champion, fairly recently here. You're a talented guitar player, and now you are the author and producer of the Complete Autocrossers Manual. So, take us back a little bit. Let's start at the very beginning. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what your roots in the sport are, and how that culminated in you producing an advanced autocross training series.
Sure, I'm happy to share some of the detail. I will say first, though, that the last time you and I spoke in front of a group of people, we were arguing about Airwolf versus Blue Thunder, and I still maintain that Airwolf is the superior helicopter and show.
Funny you should mention that, because there'll be some details that I'll add later in the show having to do with that. But let's continue on with this. Yeah.
All right. So I've been autocrossing for about roughly 13, 14 years at this point. When I started, I struggled. I struggled for a long time. I am not a natural at the sport, and my progress was really slow. And I think that story is actually, I don't think that's unique to me. I mean, I think for a lot of people, our egos may not like to admit it, but most of us are not naturals at this, right? In fact, I mean, I'd say Sam Strano is probably the most successful example of someone who is self-aware enough and humble enough to admit that he's not a natural. He's gone on record saying that, and he's been tremendously successful. Daniel McKelvey is another one who kind of openly says that he's not a natural. So the point is, for most of us that are not naturals, to then excel at autocross, we need to develop a system. But the trouble is that most of us rely on essentially hand-me-down or word-of-mouth advice, that we get over the years, and we try to apply that as if those are infallible rules. For example, probably the most common thing that everyone's always told is to drive the minimum distance in autocross, right? Almost all autocrossers know that, and they do it. So if everyone's doing it, well, why don't they win? Right? Because there's something more to it. Obviously, it's more than that, and it takes investigation to dig deep enough to find those answers. And So that's where some of this started for me a few years ago, where I was like, I keep hearing this stuff and I try to do it, but it's not getting me anywhere near the results that I want. So I need to start digging a little deeper and spending some time investigating this. And my ethos was that any system I try to build for myself has to be both validated by theory and observable in practice. It can't be just one or the other. I guess an example of this, and for any system to be usable, even by me, it needs to be accessible. Like, it needs to be something that's easily understood by people. The fact is that with autocross, at least for me, like, we don't get enough runs to rely just on trial and error to figure out the optimal plan. So having a well thought out plan ahead of time is helpful. Anyway, I might be rambling longer than you want me to, but this is kind of the genesis of this stuff, right? I mean, I spent years trying to figure out a system that works for me. I haven't invented or discovered any new secret driving techniques. This is about trying to codify what the naturals or the aliens do, right? Like, if you were to ask Michael Jordan or LeBron how they do what they do, they'd have a hard time describing it. But if you look close enough, you can start to dissect some of the things that they do, and that's what I try to do here.
And from what I've seen so far, I have not gone through the full program yet, but from what I've seen so far, it's a really interesting blending of math and physics on one side, and then kind of a psychological, educational approach to how to take this hard numerical information and then synthesize it into your own actual action. So which side did you come at this from? Were you more of a seat of the pants guy? Were you more of a math guy?
Sure.
How did it start for you? How did you get into this end of things?
So I frankly, I don't think I have the best seat of the pants feel. I approach autocross and most of the things that I enjoy, I tend to approach it from a slightly more technical angle. Like, it has to make sense to me cerebrally before I'm able to get my actions to match what my brain wants it to do, right? So I start there, but then I try to take that information and make it simple enough that I can express that to other folks.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's deal with a couple of concepts and see if we can actually get a feel for where you're coming from here. One of the most and one you brought up already. One of the most popular discussions you'll hear at any autocross is speed versus distance. We're all familiar with classic racing lines and geometric racing lines, and more radius equals more speed, but less distance can equal less time, and you'll have arguments that certain cars will demand different line than others. So how do we start to break down a concept like speed versus distance and finding the optimal line for a corner that I know on many of your courses especially, there's a lot of line choice available because you're very economical with pylon use. So how do we start to break down that equation of speed versus distance?
Yeah, so as with anything, I prefer to start with the simplest example to get a concept down and then kind of grow it from there, right? So an example I like to use in my course is, imagine just driving around a steady state circle, right? You can make certain assumptions about the weight of the car and whatever the force is that you're getting, but for a certain distance, whatever that distance is, or the circumference of the circle, you can figure out the speed that you're traveling around that circle. Now, if you double the size of that circle, so now you have twice the circumference, your speed's going to increase, right? But for the time taken to be the same, your speed would also need to double. And so you can start by just investigating, well, does that actually happen or not, right? And turns out the way the math works out is that when you double the distance, your speed only increases 1.41 times. So it's not enough. It's not enough to make up for the additional distance. So now that gives you something to start working with, right? So in practice, we've all observed that let's take a larger track, for example, that driving a wider line does pay dividends. So why is that? Why does it pay dividends on a track, even though mathematically we can show that driving a shorter distance takes less time? And the answer is not because you carry more speed onto the straightaway or anything. Here's where we start getting into why some of the lines, why we're taught some of the racing lines that we're taught, and now we start getting into what concepts are easy to explain versus easy to execute, and some of the tricks that the best drivers use that the rest of us aren't even taught.
So when you're breaking down a course, how do you start to apply these? Because we've had some good points made in both of our chats that there is not, and you made the point as well, there's not a lot of time for practice. An autocross is 3 runs of execution, and how do you trim off some of the fat that you would be normally using for practice time and be able to execute on that first run? What would your approach to a corner be? Are you going to physically go back and map some of this stuff, or is this stuff that's kind of happening in your head intuitively as you're walking a course?
Yeah, it's a mix of, I'm definitely, I walk a course a fair bit to formulate my plan and then validate my plan on subsequent walks. And then I try alternative approaches and see if it changes, some of the shapes that I'm imagining on course, right? Now, there's a few things that I do on course walks that maybe others do or don't, I'm not sure. In that I tend to look not just, first is identifying which cones matter, right? Like which cones do you need to be close to, which ones do you not need to be close to. But then what gets more interesting is it's not just about which cones you need to be close to, but at what angle you need to pass by them. Now that's what has a huge implication on the line that we take, right? Even if you have to be close to every single cone, that doesn't mean driving right at them. That means imagining a curve to get to them. And the way I like to look for that when walking a course is I tend to look at the spaces between the cones, because that's actually where I'm driving. I'm not driving to a cone. I'm driving in the spaces between them. I formulate my plan by figuring out the angle that I want to be past each cone. And then I am a huge practitioner of and believer in the power of visualization. So once I've walked a course enough to where I can mentally drive it, I do that a whole lot. And I spend time trying to visualize my run as I intend it to be. I also visualize making mistakes and how that may alter my line and how I might plan for that ahead of time so that when it happens, I'm not surprised by it.
Yeah, in fact, let me throw up. You sent me some great links to some videos here of visualization in action, and the first one is this German superbike guy who. I'm trying to remember if you've ever seen Gary Meredith walk a course, one of our local Florida autocrossers, ran nationally for many years. He will stop, close his eyes, and kind of do a Stevie Wonder thing for a few seconds, and basically sort of lock the course into himself, driving it visually in his head. And I think we all do that to some extent, but the level of concentration that it takes to drive it at the right speed, at the right angle, to not start thinking about what you're going to buy on Amazon or boobies or whatever your mind is wandering. That is where the real skill comes in. Let me bring up this German superbike guy, because this is pretty cool.
Okay, sixth gun of the
the thing to notice is just the level of detail, right? Like it's not just about where he is on track, just all the things that he's thinking about. I mean, it's fascinating.
Yeah, and now so he's a bike guy, so there's a lot of physicality in riding a motorcycle, and he's miming a lot of that physicality. But the thing that really struck me about watching this is the pace that he's going at. Whenever I visualize, I tend to go a little bit, or actually quite a bit faster than I would be in real life. I've known guys though who could sit, in a chair, start a stopwatch, run a lap of Sebring in their head, click that stopwatch when they go back over the start finish line, and nail it dead on. So I think that is definitely a skill, especially for autocross, someplace where you don't get a lot of practice. That's a skill that probably means a lot to people.
It does, but I also want to caution people that just heard that. When people hear things like that, it tends to it tends to intimidate them a little bit, that there's no way I could get to that level of fidelity and accuracy, right? And the whole thing is, you won't be able to do that at first, and that's okay. Start smaller, right? Like start with maybe just like 1 or 2 sections, like the most important corners on the course that you happen to be driving. Just try to visualize those in detail, and as you practice this skill, you'll get better at it. You're not going to immediately be able to do an entire course, within a tenth of a second of what you visualized. But you can start much smaller, and you can even start kind of practicing this as an after-the-fact exercise, where you spend a day autocrossing. You maybe get some videos of your runs. When you get home that evening, watch your best run, like watch it on the computer, and then close your eyes and try to visualize what you just watched. Right? Yeah. I mean, that's a way to practice that skill.
Well, and actually, let's take a quick look at the Corey Fergus video, because that's pretty. And this is honestly, this is more of just a bar trick than anything. This is amazing to watch this. So what this is a dude. I'm gonna crank the volume down here a little bit. So this is a dude in a simulator that is running. The lap is actually pre-recorded. He's not controlling the lap. He's just working the controls, but he's got his eyes closed, and if you watch his shifting, if you watch his inputs, his steering and his braking inputs, they are perfectly timed with what's actually going on. And this is Utah Motorsports Park, it looks like, and he is very mentally locked into that track. It's really fascinating to watch. So we had a question about course memorization, and I think that's an important part of developing skills as an autocrosser, especially for folks who might run. They'll run locally, and they've got a certain size lot, and the same couple of 2-3 course designers, and always sort of design courses of the same flavor. And then all of a sudden they make the decision to go to the Solo Nationals or go to a tour, and somebody else is designing the course, and the course is probably much longer than they're used to, much more complex than they're used to. How do you get into that mindset to start just the physical act of memorizing a longer course?
Sure. There's different strategies for this sort of thing, right? I don't know if Andy Hollis is still listening, but one of the things that he told me many years ago was to break the course into chunks, right? Like, break it into segments and just try to memorize each segment independently and then put that together, right? So that's one approach that may work. Is just, typically a course has a certain pattern to it, right? Like there may be an opening section, then a transition section, then a couple of linked sweepers, maybe another offset or another transition section, into the final sweeper and the finish, right? They have a certain pattern to them, and you can break that however you see fit, and memorize it that way. Something that works for me, and this is probably due to me having a music background, I tend to think of a course rhythmically, of just kind of the rhythm of the course. Each different elements have a certain, almost like a rhythmic pattern in my mind, and that helps me memorize a course. So I mean, I just encourage people to experiment with different techniques or kind of memorization tools that work for you. But I think Andy's advice is probably the best place to get started, which is to just chunk a course out into a few key segments and think of it that way.
Yeah, and listening to Andy Hollis in general is a great way to improve your skills. Tell us a little bit. I want to talk about some more concepts, because this stuff fascinates me from a theory perspective. But I've been remiss in not really plugging your actual course here. Tell us a little bit about the course itself. I mean, it's a kind of a multimedia thing. It brings a lot of math into it. Mm-hmm. How did this come up? What pushed you over the edge to decide to, okay, I'm going to put this all on paper or on pixels and share it with folks?
Well, so a lot of it started as me trying to put together material for myself, right? I mean, this is me. Me wanting to learn some of these nuances and imprint them into my own driving. And as I'm putting this stuff together, if it helps other people, that's great, right? So my approach with it is kind of really began with a system that works for me, which is to start by by getting together a lot of technical detail, like some of the theories and the math and the physics behind line selection and staying on the edge of grip and extracting the maximum from the tires, etc. Even to the kind of science from a psychology perspective of what makes us nervous, how do we perform better when we're under pressure, how do we learn better, like all those things, right? Kind of start at a scientific level and then figure out how to distill that to digestible components that everyone can understand. Like an analogy I like to use is think of trying to teach someone calculus or integration, right? You can tell someone that, look, you're never going to need integration. You just need to know how to integrate this one particular thing. Here's the answer. That's like telling them, drive a circular line or drive a late apex line. You're just giving them the answer and not having to think about it.
Right.
The other approach is to get so deep into the calculus of it that you lose your entire audience and no one's paying attention anymore. A third way is to be like, well, imagine an X and Y axis and imagine a graph, right? Some kind of curve there. Integration is simply calculating the area under that curve. Now it makes sense to people, right? Now, even if they don't know how to perform the calculus and do the calculation, they understand what it is and why they're doing it. So that's what I try to do with a course, is to take all of these concepts, like the rules behind line selection and the rules behind how the line is affected by different vehicles and such, and make it kind of easily understood such that you can apply it to any situation.
So what's the course actually consist of? What are the physical materials that we're going to get?
Yeah.
And it's we should plug it here too. Your website, Beyond Seat Time, a lot of great discussions and blog posts there, and then the course is available. We'll throw up the links in the chat here in a second. And it's only like $58 or something. It's not.
That's right. Yeah.
It's like an event entry price. So what are the actual materials we're talking about here?
Yeah, you get over 2 hours of video content, and that's broken up, right, by subject and stuff. So there's over 2 hours of video content, a whole bunch of supplementary materials, like that's other videos to review or downloadable PDFs and worksheets to work through some examples and such. So you're getting quite a bit there, and I suspect it's going to take the average person a reasonable amount of time to work through all that material, because I like to think of it not as a, go through it once and you're done with it. It's the kind of thing that you're probably going to revisit a bunch of times as your skills improve, because you go back to the same material again and it's going to take on new meaning, or you're going to find more nuance in it, as your skills have gotten better. And so like you said, the course it's $58, which is roughly the cost of one entry or one event when you figure out the event fees, your tire wear, and maybe your gas expenses. That's all it costs. So yeah, it's
and if you're someplace where you're snowed in for the rest of the winter, it's a great way to kind of get yourself keep the skills in the front of your mind while you get ready for next season. Vivek, take a break, get a drink, go to the bathroom, do whatever you got to do. I got to pay a couple of bills here. We'll be back to you in just a second. I want to talk about perfect. It looks like you've done some work on that one already. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the mental aspect of things, because I think the real challenge for a lot of people is okay, I can be familiar with the math and physics, or I can have this great sort of intuitive understanding, but blending the two of those things, I think, is where the real problems come in. I want to talk about that when we come back. So we will see you in just a couple of seconds, and I will talk to you folks about the people that make this show possible. Folks, I am talking about our friends at CRC Industries. Hey folks, has this ever happened to you? Have you ever invited a race team over to your shop for an internet broadcast, and on the way into your yard, they snag your fence with their trailer and tear it all apart, and you got to put a new gate up the next day? Happens to all of us. And when that happens, when you put that new chain on the gate actuator, use a lot of CMC white lithium grease. A real world application of this stuff. Yes, the guys from Circuit Motorsports, when they brought their Mustang over, they ripped the ass out of my fence. It was a very honest accident. It gave me a good excuse to do a little bit of tune up on our power sliding gate out there. And I used a lot of CRC products to do that. I used a lot of the white lithium grease to lubricate the chain. I used, where'd it go? Oh yeah, their new weld aid stuff. This stuff, I was welding it up with a 110 volt flux core MIG welder, and it was like galvanized fence pieces, so just garbage welds. their new weld aid stuff, it's like a weld prep cleaner stuff, works really, really well. I'm very impressed. Even better than CRC making great products, though, is they give a lot back to this universe that we live in, this universe of amateur and professional motorsports. They are supporters of the $2,000 challenge. So when you're getting that CRC stuff, you are giving a little bit back to this community that we live in. So if you're out there, if you're making choices, you choose that CRC stuff, my thanks to you for doing that. Also, our friends at Autobooks. And David says, I'm a trooper for being here and executing the show as good as I am. If you couldn't tell, I am sick as hell. But here's why I am executing the show as well as I am. Good old-fashioned punk rock cough medicine. The kind that your friends and you used to get wasted in the graveyard on. And it is keeping me going here. Our friends at Autobooks, you have another 24 hours or so to get your orders in and get them in time for Christmas. Of course, if you order them after that, you'll still get them after Christmas. Let me bring on a little message that our friends at Autobooks sent along to us, and they would like to share with you. Here's Jerry.
Hi, I'm Matt Stone, and this is my new baby, my new book called Hot Rod Empire. If you love Margie and the epic Robert E. Peterson, all the magazines they created, the whole birth of hot rodding in California, their museums and car collection, it's all in here. I'm very proud to have known these epic people. You can buy my new book, Hot Rod Empire, from autobooks-aerobooks.com in Burbank, California. Order right now and they'll have it to you as quick as they can. Thanks for watching.
Actually, my bad, that wasn't Jerry, that was Matt Stone, who's got a very cool new book out. The thing I love about and Autobooks made a few videos for us that they, just cool stuff that they have there. As much as I love what Matt's holding up or what Jerry's holding up in some of the other videos, I love zooming in and seeing some of the other stuff in that store because it's like walking into a museum where you can buy everything. It is just a really, really amazing repository of printed physical artifacts of car history, and it's extremely cool. If you ever have the chance to get out to Burbank, I definitely recommend that you check it out. If you can't make it out there in person, autobooks-aerobooks.com on the web, and you can order any of their stuff. And there's still time, if you're watching this on Wednesday or Thursday before Christmas, you can still order stuff today or tomorrow and get it in time for Christmas. All right, speaking of awesome stuff for Christmas, let me and smallin myself and bring Vivek back in here. So this sounds like a fantastic Christmas gift for the autocrosser in your life, or even yourself. So let's talk about the mental aspect of this sport a little bit, because I think that's one of the things. I love the technical aspects. I love the physics of everything, but I love the fact that autocross is one of the most intense automotive sports that you will ever participate in, and there's no time when you are in a car under power that you're resting, that you're not doing anything, that you're not at 100% concentration level or physical performance level. How do you get there? I mean, do you have an athletic background? How do you get yourself in the right headspace to perform at that level?
Sure. So again, I struggled with that for a while. Even though, I do have an athletic background. I ran track and played soccer and tennis and all this stuff for years. But as you said, autocross is outrageously difficult. I mean, just you have to be, 60 seconds doesn't sound like a lot of time, but to be on completely with 100% focus for 60 seconds is really hard. And I did struggle with it for a long time. And that's not to say I'm a master at it now. I mean, I still struggle with it from time to time now as well, but I think I've gotten better with it over time. I think the first step I was about to use the word conquering, but I'm going to change it to just even making inroads or addressing some of the kind of mental challenges of the sport, or to embrace the process of learning, if you will, right? Like you have to kind of have that mindset of accepting that there's work that you have to do on your driving and your approach to driving. Once you kind of get that mindset, then you maybe take a closer look at what are the things that impede your focus? What things at an event might be stealing your focus that you're not aware of, right? Like an example I like to use is, so many of us have had the experience where we come back from a run, we check our tire pressures, and 10 minutes later, we can't remember if we checked our tire pressures yet or not, right? And that's just our brain churning on nervous energy. And one technique to really help with that and help with your focus in general is implementing kind of a pre-performance routine or routines in general. Like if you routinize certain aspects of being at an event, it almost creates a Pavlovian response, to where it could be a simple kind of like a couple of phrases that you repeat to yourself as you're getting to the line, go through a mental checklist, and all of a sudden now your mind and body are in tune, maybe a couple of deep breaths, and that kind of gets you ready, right? So there's a whole bunch of techniques you can employ.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well. I mean, we keep a lot of checklists as to what works for our car, as to what tire pressures we run, what shock settings we run, what sway bar adjustments we run. I doubt there's many people out there that keep quality notes as to what works for us mentally. What things have we done in the past that put us in a good mental frame of mind? That's just as worth writing down as any of your tire pressures, I would think, to be able to like you say, to routinize that process, to make it a set, fixed process. I know I need to be in the car, when the grid guy is 8 cars away, because that's the amount of time I'm going to have. I need to listen to a certain song or have a certain trigger phrase or do something, and that information, because autocross is so complicated, so intense, and so mentally and physically demanding, I think that is important information to figure out what makes you perform as well as what makes your car perform.
Totally. I mean, I think I think keeping, whether it's mental notes or actual physical notes, but observing that is more important than observing tire pressures and stuff like that, because no matter what your tire pressures are, how much you extract out of them is a function of your inputs, right? So kind of observing how the conditions around you affect your performance, I think that has a much greater degree of impact on the results than 1 or 2 psi off from a tire pressure perspective.
Yeah. The difference between signal and noise there, I think, is going to be less than if your mind suddenly wanders to your shopping list in the middle of a run. So let's talk about the physical aspect of the performance. Is there something consistent you see among people that they are doing wrong behind the wheel? Do you have beliefs that there are physically right and wrong ways to operate the controls? I mean, are you where do you stand on shuffle steering or left foot braking or any of those sort of controversial topics?
Yeah. So it's interesting you bring that up, right? Because I mean that's one of the subjects I write about in this course too, where like my take on let's take shuffle steering as the example, right? I don't put a lot of emphasis on whether you shuffle steer or not. Like the car doesn't care whether you shuffle steer or not. The car doesn't care whether you're pulling down with the bottom arm or pushing up with the top arm. It doesn't care about any of that stuff. All that matters is, are you able to give the car the right inputs at the right time? Whatever technique that takes, great, right? I mean, whatever works for you, as long as you're able to give the right input at the right time and at the right rate, that's all that matters at the end of the day. Shuffle steering, it probably came about as a practice back when steering racks were a lot slower than they are today. But if it's something you're used to and you do well, keep doing it. If holding onto the wheel at a 9 and 3 feels better to you, do that. Like, I'm not so concerned about the where your hands are placed and all that stuff, as long as you can get the right inputs into the car.
So, what about we have our mental game, we have our physical game, we have the physics game. How do those blend together? How do we then synthesize those 3 things into one holistic performance? Are there 2 of those 3 things we should concentrate on? Is there one of those we should get right before the other 2? Is there a certain percentage of each we should try and think about blending together?
Sure. I mean, and the answer to that, I think, is going to depend a little bit on our own individual makeup, right? In terms of what order do we process information in, and and maybe even where in the development stage we are. Like someone that's maybe newer to autocross, my philosophy is I think you should understand line selection and some of that physics first, because position is so much more important than speed. Like once you're able to get the position right, you can add speed later, and you can figure out some of the other mental nuances that are hurting your performance later on. But that comes first. If you're already an intermediate or advanced driver or a national champion, even what you work on at that point kind of depends on you taking the time to be a little introspective and figuring out where the holes are in your game to figure out which one of those or what combination of those you need to address.
So you won a Pro Solo championship a couple years ago, and that is quite an achievement because it demands performance not just in a single event, but in a succession of events over a, nearly an entire season. So when you were driving home, in the middle of September from Lincoln after sealing that championship up, what was kind of going through your head about, here's stuff that I really did right this season that I want to hold on to for next season? What were some of your personal success strategies? Are there any of those things that you maybe had a hard time recovering the next time you got in the car?
Absolutely. So my Pro Solo championship was actually this year.
Oh, that's right.
And a lot of, so the thing that I think I did well this year is actually a direct consequence of having worked on this course. Like one of my focuses in trying to build this course was doing a lot of work on, deriving a system for line selection and a system for coming up with a solid game plan before run number one, right? Consistently, I want to say at every single event I attended this year, at the end of first runs, I was in the lead. So what that does, whether I end up winning the event or not, that puts me in the position of power after run one, right? I'm the guy that everyone's chasing, and I'm confident after run one, so it puts me in a better mindset to perform better on runs 2 and 3. That was a case this year at the pro finale as well, where after first runs, I was in the lead and I had people chasing me, and people got very close. Some people maybe even had faster raw times that they coned. But I think getting that plan right ahead of time, to where after run one I can be right there at the front of the pack, I think that really helped me this year. Where I still have work to do, like immediately on the drive back home from Lincoln, I tend to be very improvement focused, so I tend to not think about the things that I did well, and I'm like, all right, what else do I need to work on, right? So my execution is still a little hit or miss. I tend to take too many risks. I'm perhaps a little over aggressive behind the wheel, and that can get me in trouble. So that's what I spent more time thinking on, about on my drive back, is how do I get better at identifying my execution errors more quickly and even preemptively to where I'm not making them. So that's where my focus is right now.
So I think we've all had bad days where it's just garbage from the first run on. We've all had good days where we seem to be in one zone or the other. What do you do when things all of a sudden go bad in the middle? Maybe you started out feeling fairly well, and then all of a sudden everybody else goes faster, and you already felt capped out. That's a time, I think, when a lot of bad decisions are made after stuff like that happens.
Yeah, so I think the right, I don't even want to use the word right, the optimal approach maybe in that scenario, again, depends a little bit on your own psychological makeup, right? Are you the type of person who is motivated by knowing the position that you are and how far behind the leader you are, or does that put additional pressure on you and hurt your performance? Are you good at being able to identify how close to the ideal run you were without knowing your position? Like, are you able to implicitly figure that out, kind of based on how your execution compared to your visualized optimal run? Or do you need to know other people's times to figure out what's possible, right? I think knowing some of those things can help you figure out a strategy ahead of time to cope with those kinds of situations, right? And when you're in that scenario, like where you maybe were in the lead ahead and now, maybe in the second session of Pro Solo, everyone else has gone way faster and you're struggling. What works for me is to kind of maybe detach from the scenario for just a second, go back to myself, right? Because the fact of the matter is, at any event, I do not control whether I win or not. I only control my performance. Like, I cannot control how anyone else does. I only have control over how I do. And my kind of North Star that I kind of gravitate towards is my visualized run, right? So I'm like, all right, shut everything else out, go back to the run that I want to do. What is preventing me from achieving that? Try to figure out the mistakes that I'm making and where there might be room for optimization, and then go try to get it.
So if we're talking about progression through our skill set with autocross, I tend to see about 4 different major divisions with autocrossers. Is you've got a group of beginners, you've got a group of people that have sort of graduated from beginner status to seasoned, familiar autocross status. They know the difference between slow and fast. They're sort of in the meat of the pack. If it was a bicycle race, it would be the people that make up, the peloton, the large group
Sure.
of people. Then you've got a group of people that are at the front of that peloton, which is a place where I've considered myself for the longest time. If there's 2 guys go by and they're leading the race, then a whole big group of people go by a little bit after that. I'm right at the front of that group, and yeah. I think the hardest jump to make is from the front of that big group to that sort of elite status group. Where do you see the skills divisions between groups of autocrossers?
Sure. So starting from the kind of from the bottom rung, right? Kind of like the novice to intermediate leap. I mean, I think a lot of that leap is about the fundamentals, right? It's about getting consistent with car placement, and just getting more adept at car control. Like that's what kind of gets you from the beginner to the intermediate level. From intermediate to, let's call it advanced, right? Like the people that are able to run at the front of the pack. It's kind of like more finer nuances of that stuff, like being able to get better at carrying speed through elements and getting your corner entry right, being more predictive with car control rather than just reactive to it, being able to use rotation instead of kind of being intimidated by it and stuff like that, right? And as you said, the hardest leap to make is from someone who can run at the front of the pack to someone who can consistently win, right? And actually, I did a lot of research on this. Like I interviewed several of the multi-time national champions in the sport to kind of get some of my thoughts on this. And I put that up as a post on the Beyond Seat Time website. I mean, that's available for anyone can go look at it. And what a lot of it came down to is that the people that make the leap to the kind of elite level, they're just more willing to seek out help, and they spend a lot of time on the mental preparation before and during an event. Like they spend time figuring out what their strategy is going to be for the 3 runs, whereas most of the rest of us just go out and drive, right? Without much of we may have a plan for what our line's going to be and stuff like that, but not a strategy for our approach for the 3 runs. And so they're consistently just putting more thought and more planning into their driving.
So you talk to a lot of people. What would you say the breakdown is with the real elite level autocrossers? How many of them are there just based on pure skill? How many of them are there based on analytic efficiency, or do you really have to have all of those ingredients to be an elite level autocrosser?
So here's where we get into a bit of a philosophical debate, right? Where I'm not a believer in the talent argument. I think all talent does is give you a starting point. Where you take that is a function of the work that you put in. So in my eye, talent alone, or it's not a prerequisite to getting to the elite level, in my eye, right? From the people that I talk to, or even outside the people that I talk to, in general, in autocross today, I'd say there are I'd say there's 10 or fewer people at the elite level that I would even say have, kind of like a raw, unbridled talent. The rest have all put a whole bunch of work into it to get to the level that they're at. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, and where would you put yourself on on that scale. I mean, and obviously, I think it sounds like you value the hard work end. But what, personally, what are you having? What do you think is separating you from being the best autocrosser you can possibly be?
Sure. I think I'd say I'll get to that answer in just a second. So
Okay.
I'd say my talent level is maybe like a 4 or a 5 on like a 10 scale, right? And the amount of work that I've put in when I first started autocross was probably close to 0, and has been this slow ramp up, right? And now I'm obviously putting a whole lot more work into it. And I think that's what has paid the greatest dividends for me. So I think what I need to work on for myself from now at this point to get to what's the next level for me, I think is a lot of tuning some of the mental side of things, essentially sharpening up my execution and mental game, not so much the driving line and the physics of driving. I think on any random given day, I think I can be as fast as anybody, but I can't do that consistently just yet. And so that's what I'm working on.
So good question from David on Facebook is, we really have not addressed at all during this discussion anything having to do with car setup or car familiarity, and how much of a dependency do you think it is being familiar with certain cars, having a lot of experience in certain cars? Yeah, I think you could see examples of both in practice, where you see a guy like Brian Heitkoder jump into a strange car and win in 2018, but then you see guys like Rob Lewis and Tommy Pulliam. They've been developing that car for many years. They developed it to the point where their Mustang won a championship. Can you make up for setup with talent, and can you make up for talent with superior setup and familiarity?
Sure, you can. I mean, the ideal combination is always both, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, the unbeatable combination is the best car setup and all of the driving skills in the world, right? But none of us are perfect. Absolutely, none of us are ever going to put in the perfect lap. No matter how skilled we are. So there's always going to be some capability to make up for some shortcoming with something else, right? I mean, I think both approaches are perfectly valid. It's kind of like the difference between being a generalist and a specialist, right? They both, have their place. Like one of the benefits of being someone who can adapt quickly to different types of cars, just jump into anything and go fast, is it gives you more tools for car control, and it makes you more familiar with different handling scenarios. Like you could have the most perfectly set up car, but on some given day on some certain surface, the car may not handle like it always does, right? And if you're so attuned to your car that you only perform well when conditions are ideal, you're going to struggle a little. Whereas someone that has the ability to adapt more easily is probably going to excel on that day.
Gotcha. All right. Hey, I could do this all night, and it would be interesting, but we got to start wrapping stuff up here. But this has been fascinating. I want to throw out another plug for the course, because if it's a fraction as interesting as what we've been talking about tonight, there's great info in there. So if you go to beyondseattime.com, there's links to it. It's $58. I mean, it's less than you're going to pay to go to an event and buy lunch, and couple hours worth of solid training materials, and not just some of this touchy-feely stuff we've been talking about over the last 20 minutes or so, but solid math that gives you a foundation for how to integrate the more mental aspects of things. So yeah, Complete Autocrossers Manual out now. So I mentioned earlier that I was gonna bring up your frequent appearances at our Tacos and Talent venue. We have, if you're not familiar with Solo Nationals, we have kind of an open mic talent show to kick off the week. Vivek is a former winner of that event. He's got some amazing guitar skills. In this last year, he did a fantastic rendition of the Airwolf theme. And now, normally, as the host and MC of that show, I would not throw my own hat into the ring and perform as such. But as a connoisseur of fine helicopter-based entertainment, I have to tell you that I'm throwing the gauntlet down, and I'm bringing a version of the Blue Thunder theme for 2019, and I hope that you will up your game and try and put me in my place, because I feel like I need to defend the superior helicopter-based entertainment.
Oh.
No reflection on your skills, just your taste in helicopter shows, my friend. So yeah, we've the gauntlet has been thrown, in other words. So we'll see that. So hey man, thank you very much for doing this tonight. This was great. I can't wait to get into the course myself a little bit. Anything you can leave us with tonight?
No, I mean, again, thank you for having me. This was great. This was really enjoyable. I mean, I hope the people listening had kind of enjoyed this. If you have any questions about the course or the online course, you know where to find me. I mean, or at least most of you do. I'm on Facebook. My email's on my website. Ask me anything you want about the course. We can talk about it. I'm firmly embedded in the autocross community. I'm not hard to find. If you take the course and it's if it doesn't work for you, come talk to me. Let's figure out what you need. I'm happy to help in any way possible. Other than that, that's like I said, I hope you guys find it valuable.
Awesome, man. Well, you're a benefit to the sport. We definitely appreciate it, Vivek. It was good talking to you. I will hopefully see you at an event before too long. So have a great night, my friend.
Cheers, JG. All right, see ya.
All right, that was awesome. Let me get my big infected mug back up here. There we go. Wow, that was very cool. I am looking for. I'm actually gonna go and do this myself here, because it's a lot of really fascinating stuff, and I love people that take the time to provide the extra levels of analysis, the extra levels of complexity to an already very complex sport, and try and simplify things a little bit. So very cool that Vivek has done that. Alrighty, let's deal with any questions that we may have missed. Thank you for all of the kind words. Thank you very much to Walgreens Cold and Flu Medicine for getting me through tonight. I want to give a couple quick shout outs to the stuff that I like a lot. We came home with a couple of these Nebo flashlights from PRI, and I shouldn't even turn this on, because it's just crazy bright. This is the Big Larry 2 by Nebo. This is I think they call it the Slim Line or something. These have convinced. Actually, they sent us home with a couple of these from PRI. I immediately went to Amazon and bought a couple other Nebo flashlights. I am now firmly convinced that I will never buy a crappy flashlight again anytime in my life, because these are amazing. And these are $20-$25 lights, and they are phenomenal. So shout out to Nebo for making great stuff. Also, these guys, White Pony Absorbance. This is a plastic bag full of white powder, and kudos to them for handing out plastic bags full of white powder as samples at PRI, and only putting the sticker on one side. But I've not had a chance to try this stuff out yet. These guys are going to be at the Rolex 24 at Daytona doing some demos in our booth. Apparently it is a fairly effective, biodegradable, 100% safe to be around humans absorbent. So if you do stuff, if you're spilling brake fluid all the time, if you're spilling fluids all over your shop, this is the stuff you want to have a bucket of nearby. You can check them out at whiteponydry.com. And yeah, I saw some of the demos online. I'm gonna, next time we're out in the shop, I'll try and do a little demo with this stuff. So yeah, shout out to Nebo and White Pony for making great stuff. Also, please do not forget the folks that make this show possible. I am talking about folks like our friends from CRC, of course, makers of Brake Clean. Everybody knows about Brake Clean. Everybody's got cans of Brake Clean around everywhere, because it's good, because it kind of takes anything off of anything else. It's just a handy thing to have around the shop. This is one of the few cans of Brake Clean in my shop without thumbprints all over it, and it will remain that way for at least a little while longer. We are fans of their products. We are just as big of a fans of the fact that they support all kinds of stuff in our world of motorsports, like our $2,000 challenge, like racing at every level. So if you are buying automotive chemicals, if you're buying lithium grease or carb cleaner or some of their new weld aid stuff, you're doing some welding, want to prep that base metal, and you're buying that CRC stuff, you're getting a good product. You're also giving a little bit back to our community. Also, please check out our friends at Autobooks. They are still available for Christmas shipping if you order sometime within the next about 24 hours before they close tomorrow, Thursday, the, what's that going to be, the 20th? Yes, anytime before they close on Thursday, the 20th, they can more than likely get stuff out to you via priority mail. And they have tens of thousands of books, magazines, DVDs from the entire history of the automobile. We showed a video of theirs earlier. All kinds of cool old like Carcraft and Road and Track magazines sitting around. Tech manuals, art books, photography, history, really, really cool stuff. It's like walking into a museum, but everything has a price tag on it. And you might meet Jay Leno, you might meet Tommy Kendall, you might meet John Paul Jr. They have really cool live events there every week. If you can't make it out to Burbank, I invite you to go to their website, autobooks-aerobooks.com. All righty. Thanks very much to Vivek. He's actually in the Facebook chat answering some questions. And we got somebody looking for the pony powder already. And Nathan says the lights look handy for inspecting damaged gates. So yeah, so our guest a couple weeks ago, if you weren't tuned in earlier, our guest a couple weeks ago grabbed the end of my gate. We have a power sliding gate coming into our property. They grabbed the end of the gate with their trailer and pulled it apart. The only thing that saved the gate was its shoddy construction. There were a couple of welds on the end of the gate that the welds popped, and it basically let the whole assembly flex. If those welds were stronger and it held, it would have tweaked all of the structure of the gate. It would have been a real disaster. But we got away with one that gave me a chance to tune the gate up a little bit, and gave me a chance to use some great CRC products in cleaning the mechanisms and lubricating some of the new mechanisms. And it's always fun when we can use the stuff that we recommend. Andy says, get well soon. I hope to. I'm gonna down about half of this guy as soon as the show's over, and then I will check out, ladies and gentlemen. Next week, here is what's coming up next week. I don't know. It's gonna be the day after Christmas. I don't know how big of a crowd we're gonna have. We may have stuff. If we do have a show planned, I'll let you know in advance. Whatever happens, I'm gonna come on for a while, at least say hi to everybody, and pass along some holiday wishes. But don't know if we will have a planned subject show next week. It's going to kind of depend on what everybody's availability is like over the holiday week. The week after that is going to be that's going to be very, very cool. The crew from eEuro Parts is going to be here with one of their race cars that they will be testing at the Roar before the Rolex. Probably going to be one of their TCR class Audis. We're going to have a chance to take a very up-close look at that. We're very, very excited about that. Upcoming shows over the next couple months. We've got the folks from Cometic Gaskets coming on sometime in February, I believe. They're going to talk about how to make your own gaskets, what the difference is between a good gasket and a crappy gasket, what to look for when you're buying gaskets, all kinds of very, very cool stuff there. I'm going to be talking to some folks about safety equipment and how to choose proper safety equipment, how to outfit your car properly, whether you're doing Lemons Champ Car Racing or whether you're doing, full-on IMSA SCCA Pro stuff, how to take some of these techniques from high-end safety, introduce them into your lower-end, more budget race car. And, of course, whatever we make up Wednesday afternoon before the show. And that is what we're doing. Okay. All right, we got some good discussion going on in the Facebook chat. You guys can head over there if you want. Thanks to everybody watching us on YouTube. Thanks to everybody watching us on Facebook. Thanks for all the likes and shares. If you're watching us on YouTube, do me a favor, go down and subscribe to our channel. We've picked up a bunch of subscribers in the last couple weeks. We really appreciate that. And that is going to be it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I'm JG Pastor Jack for the good folks at CRC Industries, for the good folks at Autobooks, Aerobooks out in Burbank. This is Grassroots Motorsports Live, presented by CRC Industries. I will see you again next week. I hope your holiday season is a joyous one. Good night, everybody.